My younger brother is getting married, and I need to at least bring a girlfriend so my family won't disown me. If you pretend to be my girlfriend, I'll pay off your house mortgage debt." Ashley Cooper almost dropped the tray of dirty cups she was carrying. The man in the $3,000 suit who had spent the last half hour completely ignoring her while typing on his laptop now stared at her as if she were a math problem he'd just solved. Douglas Blackwood sat perfectly still in the corner booth of Romano's cafe, his steel gray eyes calculating every micro-expression on her face. The youngest billionaire in the state, owner of half the city's financial district, was now studying her like a specimen under a microscope, and she had no idea why. "Excuse me?" Ashley set the tray down with shaking hands, her voice barely above a whisper. 3 years of serving entitled executives had taught her to expect rudeness, but never anything this bizarre. "Sit down." It wasn't a request. Douglas gestured to the cracked vinyl seat across from him as if commanding a servant. "I have a proposition that will solve both our problems." Ashley glanced around the nearly empty cafe. It was almost closing time, and the last customers were gathering their things. Her manager had left an hour ago, trusting her to lock up. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across Douglas's sharp features. "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied, but her hands trembled as she wiped them on her apron. Ashley Cooper, 27 years old, works 3 jobs to keep her childhood home from foreclosure after her father's medical bankruptcy. 2 months behind on mortgage payments, facing eviction in 10 days. His voice was clinical, detached. "You're drowning in debt, and I need someone who looks exactly like what my family would consider unsuitable." Each word hit her like a physical blow. Ashley felt heat crawl up her neck, shame and fury warring in her chest. How did he know her most private humiliations? And why was he weaponizing her desperation? "You had me investigated?" The question came out as a croak. "I need a fake girlfriend for my brother's wedding this Saturday. Someone so completely wrong for me that my grandmother will have a stroke and my mother will finally stop trying to marry me off to debutantes." Douglas sipped his espresso, as casually as if discussing the weather. "You're perfect. Working class, no pedigree, probably never been to a country club in your life." Ashley shot to her feet so fast the booth table shook. "Go to hell." $80,000. The number stopped her cold. 80,000. More than enough to save the house, pay off the medical bills, maybe even take a vacation for the first time in 5 years. Maybe even go back to school like she'd always dreamed. "You're insane," she whispered, but her feet wouldn't move away from the table. Douglas leaned forward, and she caught a whiff of expensive cologne mixed with pure arrogance. "Insane is working 18-hour days for peanuts when you could save everything you love in 1 weekend." "Why me? Why not hire some actress?" A cruel smile curved his lips. "Because an actress would know how to fake having class. You won't have to pretend to be out of place. You genuinely will be." The casual cruelty in his voice made her stomach lurch. Ashley had been looked down on before, but never with such calculated precision. It was almost artistic how efficiently he dismantled her dignity. "And why exactly do you want to torture your own family?" Something flickered across his face, a crack in the perfect facade that revealed raw pain underneath. "Because they've been torturing me for 32 years. Consider this my resignation letter." The vulnerability lasted only a second before the mask slammed back into place, but Ashley caught it. There was more to this story, more to him than just arrogance and money. "What's the catch?" she asked, hating herself for even considering it. "You do exactly what I say, wear what I choose, say what I script, be the most inappropriate girlfriend the Blackwood family has ever witnessed." His eyes glittered with something between mischief and malice. "Think of it as dinner theater, except you're the entire comedy show." Ashley looked down at her stained apron, her discount sneakers, her chipped nail polish. Then she thought about the house, her father's house, where she'd learned to ride a bike in the driveway and help her mother plant roses. The house that held every good memory she had left. 100,000. Douglas's eyebrows shot up. I beg your pardon? If you want me to humiliate myself for your family's entertainment, it's going to cost you $100,000. Half up front. Ashley crossed her arms, amazed at her own audacity. And I want it in writing. For a moment, silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Then Douglas threw back his head and laughed, a rich, genuine sound that completely transformed his face from cold marble to something almost human. You've got spine. I'll give you that. He pulled out his phone. Fine. 50,000 now, 50 after the performance. But I have one additional condition. What? You have to make them believe we're madly in love. Not just dating. Completely, irrationally, head over heels obsessed with each other. His smile turned predatory. Think you can handle that, sweetheart? The endearment dripped with mockery, but something electric passed between them when he said it. Ashley felt her pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with the dangerous glint in his eyes. I can handle anything you throw at me, darling, she shot back, surprising herself with the venom in her voice. Douglas extended his hand across the table. Then we have a deal, my beloved fake girlfriend. When Ashley shook his hand, his fingers were warm and slightly rough, not the soft hands of a man who'd never worked. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her system, and from the way his eyes widened slightly, he felt it too. This is either the smartest thing I've ever done, she murmured, or the biggest mistake of my life. Douglas's smile was sharp as a blade. With any luck, it'll be both. The game had begun, and neither of them had any idea how dangerous it would become. You cannot be serious about that dress. Ashley stared at her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirrors of Bergdorf Goodman's private styling suite, wearing a designer gown that cost more than her annual salary. The midnight blue silk clung to her curves like liquid starlight, but she felt like a fraud wrapped in expensive fabric. Douglas stood behind her, arms crossed, studying her with the intensity of an art critic examining a questionable painting. His personal shopper, a razor-thin woman named Vivian, hovered nearby with barely concealed horror at his next words. Actually, it's perfect, he said, his voice carrying that familiar edge of calculated cruelty. You look exactly like someone trying too hard to fit in somewhere they don't belong. Ashley's cheeks burned. You're paying me to humiliate myself, not to actually enjoy it. Consider the enjoyment a bonus. Douglas stepped closer, his reflection joining hers in the mirror. Even in 5-inch Louboutin heels, she barely reached his shoulder. My family expects sophistication, grace. Women who were born knowing which fork to use for the salad course. And instead you're bringing me. Ashley turned to face him, the silk rustling like whispered secrets. The girl who eats cereal for dinner and has never owned a dress that required dry cleaning. Exactly. His smile was sharp enough to cut glass. You're going to be my masterpiece of social warfare. Vivian cleared her throat delicately. Perhaps we should discuss etiquette? Basic social graces? Douglas waved her away dismissively. That would defeat the entire purpose. I want her authentic, genuinely out of place, not coached to be charming. Ashley felt something cold settle in her stomach. Wait, you actually want me to embarrass myself? I thought this was just about looking wrong for you, not acting like a complete disaster. Oh, sweetheart. Douglas's voice dripped with mock sympathy. Did you think this would be easy money? My grandmother has been the queen of New York society for 60 years. My mother chairs 4 charity boards and speaks 5 languages. My brother's fiancée is literally European royalty. Each word was another weight added to Ashley's shoulders. She looked at herself again in the mirror, the girl from Queens wearing a dress that cost more than her father's monthly medical bills, about to walk into a world where she'd be dissected by people who collected art and conversation like trophies. What exactly do you expect me to do? She asked quietly. Be yourself. Douglas adjusted his platinum cufflinks, not meeting her eyes. Use the wrong fork. Mention your jobs. Talk about reality TV. Ask inappropriate questions. Don't pretend to understand their references to European vacations or art galleries. You want me to be your trained monkey." Now he did look at her, and something flickered across his face, almost like guilt. "I want you to show them that their precious world of rules and expectations is meaningless, that someone can be worth loving without a trust fund or a pedigree." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither wanted to examine too closely. Worth loving. Ashley's voice was barely a whisper. Douglas's jaw tightened. "It's just part of the performance. We need them to believe we're involved." "Right. The performance." Ashley turned back to the mirror, but now she was studying his reflection instead of her own. "Tell me something, Douglas. What did they do to you?" "What?" "Your family. What did they do that made you hate them enough to orchestrate this elaborate revenge?" For a moment, his mask slipped completely. Ashley saw raw pain flash across his features, the look of someone who'd been wounded so deeply that cruelty had become armor. "They never let me forget that I wasn't enough," he said quietly. "Never smart enough for my father, never charming enough for my mother, never anything enough. And now, my baby brother, golden boy Jeremy, who's never worked a day in his life, is marrying a princess and becoming the family heir." Ashley felt her heart do something dangerous, something that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with the broken man standing behind her. "So you're going to show up with me and prove what exactly? That you can be just as petty as they are?" Douglas's reflection met her eyes in the mirror. "I'm going to show them that their approval was never worth having in the first place. And I'm your weapon of choice. You're my truth bomb." Ashley laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You know what's funny? I actually understand wanting to prove something to people who wrote you off, but using someone else's desperation to do it?" She shook her head. "That's pure Blackwood arrogance right there." Douglas stepped back as if she'd slapped him. "You agreed to this because I'm desperate, not because I enjoy being treated like a social experiment." Ashley began gathering the silk skirt to step out of the dress. "Maybe we should call this off." "You can't." His voice cracked slightly. "I already transferred the money." Ashley froze. "What?" Douglas pulled out his phone, showing her a bank transfer confirmation. $50,000, deposited into her account 30 minutes ago. "I don't go back on my deals." You actually..." Ashley stared at the screen, her heart pounding. The mortgage payment, the medical bills, the late fees that had been keeping her awake at night. All of it solved with the tap of a screen. "The money's yours regardless," Douglas said quietly. "But I still need you on Saturday. One night, Ashley. Help me prove that love isn't about bloodlines and bank accounts." She looked at him, really looked at him. Beneath the expensive suit and cruel smile was someone just as trapped as she was. Someone who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten how to climb over them. "One night," she repeated. "And then we're even. And then we're even." But as Douglas helped her out of the designer gown, his fingers brushing her shoulders as he unzipped the dress, Ashley wondered if some debts could ever really be settled that cleanly, especially when the man paying her to break his family's hearts was starting to make hers race. "Douglas?" she said as she stepped behind the changing screen. "Yes? For what it's worth, they were wrong about you not being enough." Silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and danger. When she emerged in her own clothes, Douglas was staring out the window at the city below, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Saturday night," he said without turning around. 7 o'clock. I'll pick you up." "Saturday night," Ashley agreed, already wondering what she'd gotten herself into. The game was getting more complicated by the minute. "Douglas, darling, surely this is some sort of elaborate joke." Vivian Blackwood's voice could have frozen champagne mid-pour. She stood in the marble foyer of the Blackwood estate like a queen surveying an invasion, her pearl necklace glinting under crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than Ashley's childhood home. Ashley felt every eye in the receiving line turn toward her like spotlights seeking a target. The midnight blue gown that had looked elegant in the boutique now felt like a costume she'd stolen from someone else's life. She gripped Douglas's arm tighter, her nails probably leaving marks through his tuxedo sleeve. "Mother, I'd like you to meet Ashley Cooper." Douglas's voice carried that familiar edge of calculated defiance. "My girlfriend." The word girlfriend landed in the opulent foyer like a grenade with the pin pulled. Ashley watched recognition dawn on the faces around them. Not recognition of her, but recognition of exactly how wrong she was for this place, these people, this world. How lovely. Vivian's smile could have cut diamonds. "And what do your parents do, dear?" Ashley felt her throat close. This was it. The first test. She could lie, could make up something acceptable, could play the game by their rules. But Douglas's earlier words echoed in her mind. "Be yourself." "My mom's a nurse at Queen's General Hospital," Ashley said, her voice steadier than she felt. "And my dad, well, he passed away last year, lung cancer. He was a mechanic." The silence that followed was deafening. Ashley could practically hear the collective intake of breath from the assembled guests. Old money, new money. People who measured worth in stock portfolios and social connections. "Oh." Vivian's expression shifted from polite distaste to something approaching horror. "How common." Douglas's grip on Ashley's hand tightened. "Ashley's been working 3 jobs to keep her family's house. She serves coffee at Romano's downtown, stocks shelves at a grocery store, and does data entry at night. Real work, Mother. You might not be familiar with the concept." "Douglas!" The sharp rebuke came from a silver-haired man Ashley recognized from business magazines. Theodore Blackwood, Douglas's father. "That's quite enough." "Is it?" Douglas smiled, but it was all teeth and no warmth. "I thought you'd want to get to know the woman I'm in love with." Ashley nearly choked on her champagne. Love? That wasn't part of the script. But Douglas was already pulling her deeper into the lion's den, toward a group of perfectly coiffed women who looked like they'd stepped out of a museum exhibit on How the Other Half Lives. "Ladies, I'd like you to meet Ashley." Douglas's voice was honey over broken glass. "Ashley, this is my grandmother's bridge club. They've been dying to meet someone. Authentic." The eldest woman, who Ashley guessed must be the legendary grandmother, looked her up and down like she was evaluating livestock. "How did you two meet?" Ashley's mind went blank. They hadn't discussed this. What was she supposed to say? The truth would end this charade before it began. "At her coffee shop," Douglas answered smoothly. "She was working the late shift, and I was there closing a business deal. She spilled coffee on my laptop." "You spilled coffee on his laptop?" One of the younger women, probably someone's trophy wife, looked genuinely scandalized. "It was an accident," Ashley protested, then realized she was defending something that never happened. "I mean, yes, I did, but it wasn't on purpose." Well, maybe a little on purpose. "He was being incredibly rude to the barista before me, and sometimes people need to be taken down a peg or two." The group exchanged glances that spoke volumes. This was exactly the kind of story that would spread through their social circle like wildfire. Douglas Blackwood, reduced to getting coffee thrown at him by a working-class girl. "How spirited," the grandmother said, her voice dripping with distaste. "She certainly has opinions," added another woman, as if having opinions was a communicable disease. Ashley felt heat creep up her neck. These people were talking about her like she wasn't standing right there, like she was some exotic animal they were observing from behind glass. "You know what I have opinions about?" Ashley said, her voice getting louder. "People who've never worked a day in their lives looking down on people who actually contribute something to society." The silence that followed was so complete that Ashley could hear the string quartet playing in the garden 3 rooms away. "Ashley," Douglas started, but she was just getting warmed up. "I mean, what do any of you actually do?" Besides charity lunches and art galas and whatever it is rich people do to convince themselves they matter. Ashley gestured wildly, her champagne sloshing dangerously close to the rim. At least when I go to bed at night, I know I helped people get their morning coffee, or helped a family find groceries on sale, or helped some small business owner organize their invoices. Young lady, the grandmother's voice could have frozen lava. I think you're forgetting where you are. Oh, I know exactly where I am. Ashley's eyes blazed. I'm in a house that could feed 100 families for a year, surrounded by people wearing jewelry that could pay for someone's cancer treatment, acting like they're better than everyone else because they were born lucky. Douglas was staring at her with something between admiration and terror. This was what he'd wanted, wasn't it? His family horrified, their precious social order disrupted. Douglas, his father's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Perhaps you and your guest would like to step outside for some air. Actually, we're fine right here, Ashley said, downing the rest of her champagne in one gulp. This is fascinating, like watching a nature documentary about an endangered species. A collective gasp went up from the group. Ashley realized she'd gone too far, but the adrenaline of finally saying what she thought about these people was intoxicating. Ashley. Douglas's voice was quiet, but firm. Let's go find our table. As he steered her away from the horrified group, Ashley caught fragments of whispered conversations. Absolutely appalling. Where did he find her? Complete disaster. Never been so insulted. The dining room was a cathedral of crystal and flowers, with tables set for what looked like a small nation-state dinner. Ashley found herself seated between Douglas and a woman who introduced herself as Lady Catherine something, who immediately began explaining the proper use of each piece of silverware as if Ashley were a particularly slow child. The soup spoon is on the outside, dear. No, not that one. The one next to it. You work from the outside in, you see. Ashley wanted to explain that she understood the concept of utensils, that being poor didn't make her stupid. But Douglas's hand on her thigh stopped her. The touch sent an unexpected jolt through her system, reminding her that this was all supposed to be an act. She's nervous, Douglas said smoothly, his thumb tracing small circles on her leg that made it hard to concentrate on anything else. It's her first time at an event like this. How charming, Lady Catherine smiled with all the warmth of a cobra. And what did you say your background was again? I didn't, Ashley managed, trying to ignore the way Douglas's touch was making her skin tingle. But since you're so interested in my resume, I graduated valedictorian from my high school, got a full scholarship to NYU for journalism, but had to drop out when my dad got sick because someone had to work to pay the medical bills that insurance wouldn't cover. The woman's face went through several interesting color changes. Oh, I see. Do you? Ashley leaned forward, Douglas's hand sliding higher on her thigh in a way that was definitely not part of their agreement. Because I'm starting to think that everyone here sees exactly what they want to see, and it has nothing to do with reality. The arrival of the first course, some kind of soup that probably had a French name Ashley couldn't pronounce, saved Lady Catherine from having to respond. Ashley picked up what she hoped was the right spoon and tasted it carefully. It was delicious, but she'd be damned if she'd admit it. This tastes like water with delusions of grandeur, she announced loudly enough for several nearby tables to hear. Douglas nearly choked on his wine. Ashley. What? I'm being honest. You said you wanted authentic. Ashley turned to him, noticing how his eyes had darkened, how his breathing had changed. Isn't this what you wanted? Your family horrified by the inappropriate girlfriend? Yes, he said quietly, his gaze dropping to her lips. Exactly what I wanted. But the way he was looking at her suggested that what he wanted was getting more complicated by the minute. As the evening progressed, Ashley continued her unintentional assault on Blackwood family sensibilities. She asked the waiter if they had ketchup for the artisanal steak. She told the woman across from her that her diamond necklace was kind of gaudy. She mentioned her student loans, her late rent, and her mother's medical bills, with the kind of casual honesty that made the assembled aristocrats shift uncomfortably in their chairs. But the moment that would be talked about in society circles for years to come happened during the speeches. Jeremy Blackwood, Douglas's golden boy younger brother, stood to toast his new bride, a genuine European princess who looked like she'd stepped out of a fairy tale. The speech was everything Ashley expected: flowery, pretentious, full of references to destiny and eternal love. "And I want to thank my family," Jeremy concluded, "for teaching me the importance of finding someone who shares your values, your background, your understanding of what really matters in life." The dig at Douglas was subtle but unmistakable. Ashley felt Douglas tense beside her, his jaw clenching as his family's golden boy delivered what was essentially a public execution disguised as a wedding toast. Ashley stood up. "I'd like to say something," she announced, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. Douglas grabbed her wrist. "Ashley, don't—" But she was already speaking, her voice clear and strong in the crystal-laden silence. "I just want to say how beautiful this wedding is, really. I've never seen anything like it." Ashley smiled at the sea of uncomfortable faces staring back at her. "And Jeremy's speech was lovely. All that stuff about finding someone who shares your values." She paused, letting the tension build. "Because I think Douglas and I do share the same values. We both believe that people should be judged by their character, not their bank account. We both think that working for what you have means more than inheriting it, and we both know that real love doesn't give a damn about whether someone went to the right schools or knows which fork to use for the fish course." The silence was so complete that Ashley could hear her own heartbeat. "So thank you, Jeremy, for reminding everyone what really matters, even if you got it completely backwards." Ashley sat down to the sound of crystal glasses trembling in shocked hands and whispered conversations erupting like brush fires across the room. Douglas stared at her with something that looked dangerously like actual admiration, and something else that made her stomach flip in ways that had nothing to do with nervousness and everything to do with the way he was looking at her like she'd just performed a miracle. "Ashley," he said quietly, his voice rough with something she couldn't identify. "What?" "Remind me to never get on your bad side." The wedding reception was about to get very, very interesting. "You magnificent, terrifying, impossible woman." Douglas's voice was rough with something Ashley couldn't identify as he pulled her into the estate's moonlit garden, away from the chaos she'd left behind in the ballroom. The string quartet still played inside, but their elegant melodies seemed muted compared to the thundering of her heartbeat. "I can't believe I just did that," Ashley whispered, her hands shaking as the adrenaline began to fade. "I basically declared war on your entire family in front of half of New York society. You were perfect." Douglas stopped beside a marble fountain, his hands finding her face in the silvery light. Absolutely perfect. The way he was looking at her made Ashley's breath catch. This wasn't the cold, calculating man who'd propositioned her in the coffee shop. This was someone else entirely, someone whose walls were cracking right in front of her eyes. "Douglas, do you have any idea what you just did in there?" His thumbs traced her cheekbones, and Ashley felt herself leaning into his touch, despite every warning bell in her head. "You said everything I've wanted to say to them for 32 years. I couldn't stand watching them talk about you like that. Jeremy's speech was cruel, and your mother—" Ashley shook her head, anger flaring again. "They don't deserve you." Something shifted in Douglas's expression. Surprise, vulnerability, something dangerously close to wonder. "No one has ever defended me like that." "Then they're all idiots." Before Ashley could process what was happening, Douglas's mouth was on hers. The kiss was desperate, hungry, full of years of suppressed emotion and current desperation. Ashley melted into him, her hands fisting in his tuxedo jacket as he pressed her back against the fountain's edge. This wasn't part of their deal. This wasn't fake or calculated or performed for anyone's benefit. This was real, and it was terrifying, and Ashley couldn't bring herself to care. When they broke apart, Both breathing hard, Douglas rested his forehead against hers. "This is a problem," he whispered. "A big problem," Ashley agreed, but neither of them moved away. "Douglas? Douglas, where are you?" Vivian Blackwood's voice cut through the garden air like a blade, sharp with fury and embarrassment. Douglas and Ashley sprang apart just as his mother appeared on the terrace, her face a mask of barely controlled rage. "There you are." Vivian's eyes swept over them, taking in Ashley's kiss-swollen lips and Douglas's disheveled hair. "The two of you have caused quite enough disruption for one evening." "Have we?" Douglas's voice was cool again, the vulnerable man from moments before disappearing behind his armor. "I thought we were just getting started. This charade has gone far enough." Vivian descended the garden steps like an avenging angel in Chanel. "I don't know what game you're playing, Douglas, but using this poor girl to humiliate your family is beneath even you." "Poor girl?" Ashley stepped forward, fury rising in her chest. "I'm standing right here, Mrs. Blackwood. And I wasn't used by anyone. Everything I said in there, I meant." Vivian's laugh was like ice cracking. "Oh my dear, you really think Douglas cares about you? This is revenge, pure and simple. He's using you to get back at us for cutting off his trust fund." Ashley felt the world tilt sideways. "What? You didn't tell her?" Vivian's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "How delicious." "Yes, dear. Douglas has been financially cut off from the family for the past 6 months. All those business deals he claims to be closing? He's drowning in debt. His company is failing, his assets are frozen, and he's one bad quarter away from bankruptcy." "Mother, that's enough." Douglas's voice was deadly quiet. "Is it? Because I think Miss Cooper deserves to know the truth about her knight in shining armor." Vivian turned to Ashley with mock sympathy. "He's not the billionaire playboy you think he is, darling. He's just another desperate man using whatever weapons he can find." Ashley's mind reeled. The money he'd transferred to her account, the casual way he'd thrown around numbers, the certainty that he could solve all her problems with a simple bank transfer. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Douglas's jaw worked, his hands clenched at his sides. "Ashley, is it true?" "Yes." The word came out like a confession. "My accounts are frozen. The company is struggling. The money I gave you was everything I had left." Ashley felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. "Everything you had left?" "I sold my watch, some artwork, called in every favor I had." Douglas's voice was raw, "But I wasn't lying about being able to pay you the rest. I will find a way." "Oh, you sweet, naive girl." Vivian's voice dripped with false pity. "He can't pay you the rest because he doesn't have it. He gambled everything on this pathetic revenge scheme." Ashley stared at Douglas, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not the arrogant billionaire who could solve problems with money, but a desperate man who'd risked everything on a plan to hurt the people who'd hurt him. "You lied to me," she said quietly. "I never lied about the important things. You let me believe you were someone you're not." Ashley's voice rose, pain and betrayal crashing over her in waves. "I defended you in there. I humiliated myself for you, and it was all based on a lie." "Ashley, please." "No." Ashley backed away from him, her chest tight with the effort of breathing. "I can't. I need to go." "Don't let her leave like this," Vivian said to Douglas, her voice suddenly gentle. "Bring her back inside. We'll figure something out. The family will help her, of course. She seems like a nice enough girl, just misguided." The condescension in those words, the assumption that Ashley needed their charity, their pity, was the final straw. "Keep your help," Ashley said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "I don't need anything from any of you." She started toward the house, desperate to escape before she completely fell apart. Behind her, she heard Douglas call her name, but she didn't turn around. Inside, the reception was still in full swing, but Ashley could feel the weight of every stare as she made her way through the crowd. Whispered conversations followed in her wake. Heard she's some kind of gold digger. Douglas always did have questionable taste. Embarrassing display. What was he thinking? Ashley kept her head high until she reached the foyer, where she finally allowed herself to run. Her heels clicked against marble as she fled toward the exit, the sound echoing like gunshots in the cavernous space. She made it to the circular driveway before Douglas caught up with her. "Ashley, wait!" She spun around, and he stopped short at the sight of tears streaming down her face. "Wait for what?" she demanded. "More lies? More manipulation? More opportunities to be your weapon against people who at least have the decency to be cruel to my face? It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen, Douglas? You pay me to humiliate myself. I play my part. And then what? You disappear back into your world of privilege while I go back to serving coffee to people who think I'm beneath them. You're not beneath anyone. That's not the point." Ashley wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing her carefully applied makeup. "The point is that you saw someone desperate and vulnerable, and you used that. You made me believe that this was about proving something real, about showing them that love doesn't care about money or status. But it was never about that, was it? It was about revenge." Douglas's face was pale in the moonlight. "At first, yes. But Ashley, what happened in there? What's happening between us is based on lies." Ashley's voice broke. "Everything about this is based on lies." A black car pulled up to the curb, the Uber she'd called while hiding in the bathroom, using the last of her phone's battery and the Wi-Fi password she'd overheard a teenager sharing. "This is me," she said, moving toward the car. "Don't leave like this," Douglas pleaded. "Let me explain." "There's nothing to explain." Ashley paused with her hand on the car door handle. "You know what the really sad part is? For a few minutes in there, I actually believed that someone like you could care about someone like me. That all the fairy tale bullshit could be real." "It can be real," Douglas said desperately. "It is real. What I feel for you. What you feel for me is gratitude that I played my part so well." Ashley got into the car, looking at him through the open window. "Enjoy your revenge, Douglas. I hope it was worth it." As the car pulled away, Ashley saw Douglas standing alone in the driveway of his family's estate, surrounded by wealth and privilege, and completely, utterly alone. She told herself that the ache in her chest was just wounded pride. She told herself that the way he'd kissed her meant nothing. She told herself that walking away was the smart thing, the right thing, the only thing she could do. But as Queens came into view through the car window, her neighborhood, her real world, the place where fairy tales didn't exist, Ashley couldn't shake the memory of the way Douglas had looked at her in the garden, like she was something precious, like she was enough, like she was worth fighting for. Even if everything else had been a lie, that moment had felt true. And that, Ashley realized as the car pulled up to her modest apartment building, was the most dangerous thing of all. Because despite everything, the lies, the manipulation, the humiliation, she was already missing him. And tomorrow, she'd have to figure out how to live with the fact that she'd fallen for a man who'd paid her to break his family's heart, when she'd ended up breaking her own instead. "Miss Cooper, there's a Douglas Blackwood here to see you. He says it's urgent." Ashley looked up from the stack of medical bills she'd been organizing on her kitchen table, her heart doing something painful at the mention of his name. It had been 3 days since the wedding disaster, 3 days of replaying every moment in her head, 3 days of telling herself she was better off without him, 3 days of missing him so much it physically hurt. "Tell him I'm not here," she called to her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd buzzed up from the lobby. "Mija, he's not going anywhere. He's been down there for 2 hours with flowers and what looks like a mariachi band." Ashley groaned and walked to her window, peering down at the street below. Sure enough, Douglas stood on the sidewalk in front of her building, still in his expensive suit but looking like he hadn't slept in days. Behind him, a full mariachi band was tuning their instruments while curious neighbors gathered to watch the spectacle. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Please, Just 5 minutes. I have something that belongs to you. Ashley stared at the message, her resolve wavering. What could possibly belong to her? She'd left the wedding with nothing but her dignity in tatters and her heart in pieces. Another text. I know you hate me. You have every right to. But there's something you need to know about your father. Ashley's blood went cold. Her father. What could Douglas possibly know about her father that she didn't? Against every instinct screaming at her to stay away, Ashley grabbed her keys and headed downstairs. Douglas looked up as she emerged from the building, relief flooding his features. He looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, like a man who'd been through hell and back. You look awful, Ashley said, crossing her arms to keep from reaching for him. I feel worse. Douglas gestured to the mariachi band. I wasn't sure you'd come down. I was prepared to serenade you until the police arrested me for disturbing the peace. Despite everything, Ashley felt her lips twitch. A mariachi band? Really? You said fairy tales were bullshit. I thought maybe we could try something more authentic. Douglas stepped closer, and Ashley caught a whiff of his cologne mixed with exhaustion. Ashley, I need to tell you about your father. My father is dead, Douglas. There's nothing to tell. Robert Cooper, mechanic at Patterson's auto shop in Astoria, diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer 18 months ago. Medical bills exceeded his insurance coverage by over $200,000. Ashley felt the ground shift beneath her feet. How do you... He came to my office 6 months before he died. The words hit Ashley like a physical blow. What? Douglas pulled out a manila folder, his hands shaking slightly. He'd heard about my company's charitable foundation. It's not well known. We don't publicize it. But we help families with medical costs when insurance falls short. Ashley stared at the folder like it might explode. That's impossible. He never said anything about because I turned him down. The confession hung in the air between them like a death sentence. Ashley felt her legs go weak, and Douglas reached out to steady her, but she jerked away from his touch. You what? My assistant scheduled the meeting. I was having a bad day. My father had just threatened to cut my funding again. My mother was pressuring me about some debutante she wanted me to meet. Your father came in wearing his work clothes, hat in his hands, so humble and polite. Douglas's voice cracked. He showed me pictures of you. Told me about your scholarship. How proud he was that you were going to be a journalist. He begged me to help so you wouldn't have to drop out of school. Ashley couldn't breathe. The world was spinning, and nothing made sense. He said, Douglas swallowed hard. He said you were the best thing he'd ever done with his life, and he couldn't bear to watch your dreams die because of his sickness. Stop. Ashley's voice was barely a whisper. I looked at this man who was dying, who was asking for help to save his daughter's future, and I said no. I said the foundation had already allocated its annual budget. I said he should try other resources. I said... Douglas's voice broke completely. I said we couldn't help people who hadn't properly researched their options before coming to us. Ashley doubled over like she'd been punched in the stomach. Her father. Her proud, stubborn father had swallowed his pride and begged for help, and Douglas had turned him away with bureaucratic coldness. I didn't know, Douglas continued desperately. I didn't know he was your father until 3 days ago, when I started really looking into your background. When I saw his name on the medical bills, when I saw the dates. Ashley, I realized what I'd done. Get away from me. Ashley's voice was raw with pain and fury. The money I gave you was guilt money. Ashley straightened up, tears streaming down her face. You destroyed my family and then tried to buy your way out of it. No, that's not... My father died thinking he failed me. Ashley screamed, not caring that half the neighborhood was watching. He died believing he couldn't provide for his family, that I had to give up everything because he wasn't good enough, smart enough, connected enough to save me. Douglas flinched as if she'd slapped him. Ashley, he worked himself to death trying to pay those bills, took extra shifts even when the chemo made him so sick he could barely stand, and all that time you could have helped him with the stroke of a pen. I know. God, Ashley, I know what I did, and I've hated myself for it every day since I figured it out. Good. Ashley wiped her face with the back of her hand. You should hate yourself, because you didn't just turn away a man asking for help. You turned away the best man who ever lived, and you did it because you were having a bad day. You're right. You're absolutely right. And nothing I do will ever make up for that. Douglas opened the folder with trembling hands. But I can try to honor what he wanted for you. Ashley looked down at the papers he was holding out. Her name was on them, along with numbers that made her head spin. What is this? A full scholarship endowment to NYU's journalism program, in your father's name. It covers tuition, books, living expenses, everything you need to finish your degree. Douglas's voice was steady now, determined. It's already been established. The money is there, waiting for you. Ashley stared at the papers, her hands shaking. I don't want your charity. It's not charity. It's justice. It's what should have happened 18 months ago. Douglas stepped closer, his voice urgent. Your father wanted you to be a journalist. He believed in you, Ashley. He died believing in you. Don't! Ashley's voice broke. Don't use him to manipulate me. I'm not manipulating you. I'm trying to give you what he wanted you to have. Douglas's eyes were bright with unshed tears. The wedding. The fake girlfriend thing. I know it started as revenge. I know I used you. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about them and started being about you. Pretty words won't fix what you did. I know they won't. But maybe this will. Douglas pulled out another set of papers. I've liquidated everything. The company, my apartment, everything I have left. It's all going into the Robert Cooper Memorial Foundation. We'll help other families like yours. We'll make sure no one else gets turned away because some entitled asshole is having a bad day. Ashley looked at him, really looked at him. This wasn't the arrogant billionaire who'd propositioned her in the coffee shop. This wasn't even the desperate man who'd used her for revenge. This was someone who'd been broken by his own cruelty and was trying to build something better from the pieces. You're giving up everything. Everything I have left, which isn't much. But it's a start. Douglas's smile was sad and genuine. Your father asked me to help his daughter. I'm 18 months late, but I'm finally saying yes. Ashley stared at the scholarship papers, her father's name printed in elegant script across the top. Robert Cooper, Memorial Scholarship. Her proud, hard-working father, immortalized in the very system that had failed him. Why should I trust you? She asked quietly. You shouldn't. I lied to you, used you, broke every promise I made. Douglas took a shaky breath. But I'm hoping you'll trust this. I love you. Not because you played a part, or because you helped me get revenge on my family. I love you because you're brave enough to stand up to people who think they're better than you. Because you defended me when no one else ever has. Because you see the good in people even when they don't deserve it. Ashley felt fresh tears spill down her cheeks. Douglas, I love you because you're exactly the kind of person your father raised you to be. Someone who fights for what's right, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. Douglas's voice was raw with emotion. I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know what I did to your family is unforgivable. But if there's any part of you that thinks we could try again, if there's any part of you that believes people can change. He gestured to the mariachi band, who immediately launched into a passionate rendition of La Vida es una lenteja. Several neighbors started clapping, and Ashley heard Mrs. Rodriguez shout, "Del que sí!" from her window. You're ridiculous, Ashley said, but she was almost smiling through her tears. I'm desperate, Douglas corrected. Desperate to prove that I can be the man you believed I was in that garden, the man your father would have approved of. Ashley looked at the scholarship papers again, then at Douglas, then at the crowd of neighbors who were now fully invested in this impromptu telenovela playing out on their street. If I say yes, she said slowly, if I even consider giving you another chance, there are conditions. Hope flickered in Douglas's eyes. Anything. The foundation isn't about guilt or atonement. It's about making sure other families don't go through what mine did. You work with me on it, not for me. Done. And we start over. Completely. No more lies. No more games. No more using each other as weapons. Yes. And you fire that mariachi band before Mrs. Fernandez calls the cops. Douglas actually laughed. The first genuine laugh she'd heard from him since that moment in the coffee shop when she demanded more money. "Does this mean—" Ashley stepped forward and kissed him, cutting off his question. This kiss was different from the desperate one in the garden. Softer, more honest, full of possibility instead of pain. When they broke apart, the mariachi band cheered, the neighbors applauded, and Mrs. Rodriguez shouted, "Ahora sí!" from her window. "This means," Ashley said against his lips, "that we're going to try to build something real. Something that would make my father proud. Something that would make us both proud," Douglas agreed, holding her close. As the mariachi band launched into another song and their impromptu audience continued to cheer, Ashley realized that sometimes the best fairy tales were the ones that started with the truth, even when the truth was ugly and painful and hard to forgive. Because the most beautiful thing about love wasn't that it made everything perfect. It was that it made everything possible. This is either the most romantic thing I've ever seen or the most insane. Ashley stood in the doorway of what used to be Douglas's penthouse office, now converted into the headquarters of the Robert Cooper Memorial Foundation. 6 months had passed since the mariachi band incident. 6 months of rebuilding trust, working side by side and slowly falling in love with the real Douglas Blackwood, not the arrogant billionaire or the desperate man seeking revenge, but the person underneath all the armor. Definitely insane, Ashley agreed, staring at the scene before her. But maybe that's what makes it perfect. The entire office had been transformed into a replica of Romano's cafe, complete with mismatched tables, the same crackling vinyl booth where their story began, and even the buzzing fluorescent light that had cast harsh shadows on their first meeting. Douglas stood in the center of it all, wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt, looking more nervous than she'd ever seen him. "You recreated our coffee shop," Ashley said, stepping into the space with wonder. "Not just any coffee shop," Douglas corrected, his voice shaky with emotion. "The place where you first told me to go to hell. The place where you demanded more money and showed me that someone could see right through my bullshit and still be brave enough to call me on it." Ashley walked to their original table, the corner booth that Douglas had commandeered like a king holding court. Now it was set with 2 simple white mugs and a thermos of what smelled like the industrial-strength coffee from Romano's. "You even got the terrible coffee right," she laughed, but tears were starting to blur her vision. "I wanted to do this right this time," Douglas said, following her to the booth. "No lies, no manipulation, no desperate schemes, just the truth." "Which is?" Douglas slid into the booth across from her, just like that first night, but everything about his posture was different now. Open instead of guarded, vulnerable instead of cold. "The truth is that you saved me, Ashley Cooper. Not just from my family or from my own stupidity, but from becoming someone I wouldn't be able to live with." He reached across the table and took her hands, his fingers warm and steady. "You taught me that real strength isn't about having power over other people. It's about using whatever power you have to lift them up." Ashley's heart hammered against her ribs. "Douglas, the foundation has helped 43 families in 6 months. 43 families who won't have to choose between medical care and their children's futures. 43 families who won't have to watch someone they love die, thinking they failed to provide." Douglas's voice cracked slightly. "Every single one of them gets helped, because you showed me who I could be, instead of who I was." "We did that," Ashley corrected. "Together." "Together," Douglas agreed, "which is why I need to ask you something." He slid out of the booth and dropped to one knee beside the table, pulling out a small velvet box that made Ashley's breath catch in her throat. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Ashley Cooper, 6 months ago I offered you a fake relationship for money. Today I'm offering you a real one for free. Douglas opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring. Not the massive diamond she might have expected from the old Douglas, but something beautiful and classic and absolutely perfect. "Will you marry me?" Ashley stared at him, this man who'd started as her worst nightmare and somehow become her greatest hope. "You're proposing in a fake coffee shop in your former office." "I'm proposing in the place where you first showed me what courage looks like, where you first made me want to be better." Douglas's smile was soft and genuine. "Besides, I thought we established that fairy tale castles are overrated." "They are," Ashley agreed, sliding out of the booth to kneel on the floor facing him. "But you know what isn't overrated?" "What?" "Second chances. Real partnerships. Love that's built on truth instead of lies." Ashley cupped his face in her hands, marveling at how different he looked when he smiled without cruelty or calculation. "Yes, Douglas Blackwood, I'll marry you." The kiss that followed was everything their first kiss in the garden should have been: honest, joyful, full of promise instead of desperation. When they broke apart, Douglas slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. "There's more," he said, helping her to her feet. "More?" Douglas gestured toward the office's floor-to-ceiling windows, and Ashley gasped. The entire courtyard below was filled with people. Familiar faces from the foundation, neighbors from her building, even Mrs. Rodriguez holding a sign that read, "Ya era hora." But in the front row, looking awkward but genuine, stood Jeremy and his princess bride. "Your brother?" Ashley asked in surprise. He wanted to apologize. They both did. Turns out watching their big brother sacrifice everything to help other people made them take a hard look at themselves. Douglas wrapped his arms around her from behind. "They've started volunteering at the foundation. Jeremy's actually pretty good with the families. He has more heart than any of us gave him credit for." Ashley leaned back against Douglas's chest, watching the crowd below cheer and wave. "And your parents?" "Still disapprove of everything about you, which frankly is one of your most attractive qualities." Douglas pressed a kiss to her temple. "But they're starting to understand that their approval was never what I needed. What I needed was someone who would love me enough to make me want to earn it." "You earn it every day," Ashley said softly. "Every family we help, every life we change, every time you choose compassion over cruelty. We earn it," Douglas corrected. "This foundation, this life we're building, it's ours together." Ashley turned in his arms, studying his face. "So what happens now? Do we ride off into the sunset? Live happily ever after?" "Now we get back to work," Douglas said simply. "We help more families. We expand the foundation. We probably fight about budget allocations and program priorities. We definitely fight about your tendency to take on every case personally and my tendency to overthink the logistics." "That sounds wonderfully normal." "Normal is underrated," Douglas agreed. "But we'll also travel, see the world. I want to show you Paris, but not the touristy parts. The little cafes where they serve coffee almost as bad as Romano's. I want to take you to my grandmother's house in Scotland, where she'll probably hate you on sight, and you'll win her over by helping her reorganize her library." "Your grandmother has a library?" "3 of them. She's going to love you." Douglas spun Ashley around the fake coffee shop, both of them laughing. "We'll come back here every year on the anniversary of our first meeting and remember how we almost got everything wrong. And how we got it right in the end. The messiest, most complicated, most beautiful way possible." Ashley looked around their recreated coffee shop, then out at the cheering crowd below, then back at the man who'd become her partner in every sense of the word. "You know what the best part is?" "What?" "This time, when you asked me to be your girlfriend, I didn't have to think about the money." Douglas threw back his head and laughed, that rich, genuine sound that had become Ashley's favorite music. "This time, when I asked you to be my girlfriend, I wasn't trying to hurt anyone else. I was trying to love you better." Mission accomplished. As Douglas kissed her again, Ashley caught sight of their reflection in the office windows. Not the arrogant billionaire and desperate barista who'd met 6 months ago, but two people who'd learned that the best love stories weren't about perfection. They were about finding someone worth growing for, worth changing for, worth becoming better for. Outside, the crowd began chanting, "Beso, beso, beso," led by Mrs. Rodriguez, whose enthusiasm for their romance had never wavered. "I think our audience is getting impatient," Douglas murmured against Ashley's lips. "Let them wait," Ashley said, pulling him closer. "I'm not done kissing my fiancé in our fake coffee shop." "Fiancé," Douglas repeated like he was testing the word. "I like the sound of that. Wait until you hear husband." "How long do I have to wait?" Ashley grinned, the expression transforming her entire face. "How does next month sound? Small ceremony, just family and friends. Maybe we could have it here, in the foundation offices. Make it about the work we're doing, the life we're building." "Perfect," Douglas said, spinning her around again. "Absolutely perfect." As Ashley laughed and the crowd cheered, and the late afternoon sun streamed through the windows of their makeshift coffee shop, she realized that fairy tales weren't bullshit after all. They were just more complicated than the storybook suggested. Sometimes the prince started out as the villain. Sometimes the princess had to save herself first. Sometimes love meant tearing down everything you thought you wanted to build something better in its place. Sometimes the best happily ever after was the one that came after the worst mistakes, the hardest truths, and the bravest choices. Sometimes it took losing everything to find out what really mattered. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, you found someone who would help you build a life worth living, not because it was easy, but because it was real. Ashley Cooper was getting married to Douglas Blackwood in a month. It was going to be absolutely, perfectly, completely imperfect. And she couldn't wait. The end. Based on a true story that never happened, but should have. The Robert Cooper Memorial Foundation continues to help families facing medical bankruptcy. Douglas and Ashley Blackwood run it together from their headquarters in a converted penthouse that still has a corner booth where they serve terrible coffee and remember how their love story began with the best, worst proposal in New York City history. Mrs. Rodriguez was the maid of honor. The mariachi band played at the wedding. Everyone lived messily ever after.